The Allied medical ship Gentle Dawn moved slowly through the broken pieces of what was once a human colony ship. The Morning Star had been a beautiful vessel 3 days ago. Now it was nothing but twisted metal and frozen death, floating in the darkness of space. Lieutenant Kira Park stood at the observation window and watched the small rescue drones fly between the wreckage. She had seen disasters before. She had pulled bodies from crashed shuttles and failing stations. But this was different. The Morning Star had carried 847 people, families, children, engineers, and doctors and teachers who were going to start anew. Life on a distant world. Now, they were all gone. The ship's sensors had detected the distress signal 2 days ago. Someone on the Morning Star had activated the emergency beacon just before the reactor exploded. That beacon had kept sending its signal through the cold vacuum of space, calling for help even when there should have been no one left alive to save. Dr. William Hayes walked onto the observation deck. He was a tall man with tired eyes and gray hair that had turned white at the temples from too many years of seeing terrible things. He stopped next to Kira and looked out at the debris field. "We found something," he said. His voice was strange. Kira had worked with Hayes for 5 years. She had never heard him sound like this before. "Bodies?" she asked. "No." Hayes shook his head slowly. "A survivor." Kira turned to look at him. She was sure she had heard wrong. "That's not possible. The reactor breach destroyed everything. The temperature out there is negative 200 degrees. There's no atmosphere, no oxygen. Nothing could survive that for 3 days." "I know," Hayes said. "But the drones found him in a cargo hold near the back of the ship. He's alive. His heart is beating. He's breathing somehow." The doctor paused and took a deep breath. "He's not wearing a suit, Kira. No helmet. No oxygen tank. Just a torn uniform. And he's alive." They brought the survivor aboard 20 minutes later. The rescue team carried him on a stretcher through the airlock while the alien crew members watched from a safe distance. The Valari were tall bird-like beings with beautiful feathers that changed color with their emotions. Right now, those feathers were pale gray with fear. The Morthacs were crystalline creatures that looked like living diamonds. They made soft clicking sounds as they watched the human survivor pass by. None of them had ever seen anything like this. No species in the known galaxy could survive hard vacuum without protection. It was simply not possible. The man on the stretcher was young, maybe 30 years old. He had black hair and a thin face covered with frost that was slowly melting in the warm air of the ship. His uniform was torn and burned in several places. A name tag on his chest read Park Jin-ho, engineering specialist. They took him to the medical bay and laid him on the examination bed. Hayes attached monitoring devices to his chest and arms while nurses wrapped heated blankets around his body. The machines beeped steadily, showing a heartbeat that should not exist. Jin-ho's eyes opened. They were dark brown, and for a moment they were confused. Then understanding filled them, followed quickly by pain. Not physical pain. Something deeper than that. "The others," Jin-ho said. His voice was rough and broken, like he had been screaming for a very long time. "Did anyone else make it?" Hayes looked at Kira. Neither of them wanted to answer. Neither of them knew how to tell this man that he was the only one. That 846 people had died while he somehow lived. "I'm sorry," Hayes finally said. "You're the only survivor we found." Jin-ho closed his eyes. A single tear rolled down his frozen cheek and turned to ice before it reached his jaw. He did not speak for a long time. When he finally opened his eyes again, something had changed in them. The confusion was gone. The hope was gone. Only a heavy, terrible weight remained. "The beacon," Jin-ho whispered. "Did you follow the beacon?" "Yes, that's how we found you." "Good," Jinho nodded slowly. Good. I kept it running. I promised them I would keep it running. So someone would come. So someone would know what happened to us. Hayes leaned closer. What did happen? Our sensors show a reactor breach, but those systems have multiple safety backups. A failure like that shouldn't be possible. It wasn't a failure. Jinho's jaw tightened. We were attacked. A ship we didn't recognize. They disabled our weapons first, then our engines. When we couldn't run or fight, they fired on the reactor core. His hands gripped the edge of the bed. They wanted to make sure no one survived. No witnesses. No evidence? Pirates? Kira asked. I don't know. I never saw their faces. I only saw their ship for a few seconds before everything exploded. Jinho looked up at the ceiling. I was in the cargo hold running final checks on our supplies. When the reactor blew, the blast wave threw me against the wall. I should have died. Everyone else died. But I didn't. He fell silent after that. The medical machines beeped their steady rhythm. The alien crew members whispered to each other in the hallway, their voices full of questions that no one could answer. Hayes stood by the bed and watched his impossible patient. The man's body temperature was rising slowly back to normal. His breathing was getting stronger. His heartbeat was steady and calm, like he was simply waking up from a long sleep. Instead of surviving 3 days in conditions that should have killed him in seconds, something was very wrong here. Something that went beyond luck or miracles. Hayes had been a doctor for 30 years. He had seen humans survive incredible things. But this was different. This was not survival. This was something else entirely. Get some rest, Hayes told Jinho. We'll talk more when you're stronger. Jinho did not respond. He had already closed his eyes. His breathing slowed as sleep took him away from the pain of being the only one left alive. Hayes walked out of the medical bay and found Kira waiting for him. The Valari commander, a graceful being named Swift Song at Dawn, stood beside her. His feathers were shifting between gray and deep blue, showing confusion and concern. How is this possible? Swift Song asked. No human could survive such conditions. No species in the Alliance could survive such conditions. What is he? Hayes shook his head. I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. He walked back to his office and began preparing the diagnostic droids for a full-body scan. Whatever secrets Park Jinho was carrying, Hayes was determined to uncover them. He had no idea what he was about to discover. Jinho slept for 6 hours. During that time, Hayes prepared everything he needed for the most detailed medical scan he had ever performed. He calibrated the diagnostic droids 3 times. He checked every sensor and every scanner. He wanted to make sure nothing was missed. The Valari and Morthax crew members stayed away from the medical bay. They were afraid, and Hayes could not blame them. In all the years the Alliance had existed, no species had ever shown the ability to survive hard vacuum without protection. Humans were supposed to be one of the weaker species. They needed air to breathe. They needed warmth to survive. They could not handle radiation or extreme pressure. They were soft and fragile compared to many other beings in the galaxy. But Park Jinho had survived 3 days in conditions that should have killed him instantly. That changed everything. When Jinho finally woke up, Hayes was waiting beside his bed. The survivor looked better now. Color had returned to his face. His eyes were clear and alert. He sat up slowly and looked around the medical bay like he was seeing it for the first time. How do you feel? Hayes asked. Tired, Jinho said. Hungry, but alive. He paused. I should not be alive. No, Hayes agreed. You should not be. That's why I need to run some tests. I need to understand what happened to you out there. How you survived. Jinho was quiet for a long moment. Hayes watched his face and saw something pass through his eyes. It looked like doubt, like he was trying to decide something important. "Okay," Jinho finally said. "Run your tests." Hayes activated the diagnostic droids. There were 3 of them, silver and white machines about the size of a large dog. They floated on anti-gravity fields and made soft humming sounds as they moved. Their sensor arrays glowed blue as they approached Jinho's bed. The first droid began scanning Jinho's head and brain. The second focused on his chest and internal organs. The third moved down to examine his spine and nervous system. Data began flowing onto Hayes' monitor in streams of numbers and images. Everything looked normal at first. Jinho's brain showed no damage. His heart was strong. His lungs were clear. His blood pressure was perfect. Hayes started to think that maybe this was all just some incredible luck. Maybe Jinho had found a pocket of trapped air in the cargo hold. Maybe his body had simply shut down to protect itself until rescue arrived. Then the third droid stopped moving. Hayes looked up from his monitor. The droid was hovering over Jinho's lower back, its sensors pointed at his spine. Its lights were flashing in a pattern Hayes had never seen before. "What's wrong?" Hayes asked. The droid did not answer. Its optical sensors flickered rapidly, like it was trying to process something it could not understand. Then its voice modulator activated, and it spoke in a flat, mechanical tone that seemed somehow confused. "Alert. Multiple unregistered implants detected along spinal column." Hayes felt his heart skip a beat. "Implants? What kind of implants?" The droid continued scanning. More data appeared on Hayes' monitor, and his confusion turned to shock. The images showed Jinho's spine in perfect detail. But it was not a normal spine. Wrapped around the bone and threaded through the nerve tissue with thin silver wires and small metallic nodes. They ran from the base of his skull all the way down to his lower back. "Neural reactive polymer mesh identified," the droid announced. "Cellular regeneration nodes active. Thermal regulation system functioning. Oxygen recycling nanites present in bloodstream." Hayes stared at the screen. He could not believe what he was seeing. Jinho's body had been modified. Someone had installed technology inside him that allowed his cells to heal themselves. That kept his body temperature stable in extreme cold. That recycled the oxygen in his blood so he could survive without breathing. This was not luck. This was engineering. Someone had turned Park Jinho into something more than human. "Classification?" Hayes asked the droid. His voice was barely a whisper. The droid paused. Hayes counted the seconds. 1, 2, 4. The machine should have answered instantly. It could process millions of data points in less than a second. But it remained silent for almost 5 seconds before speaking again. "Classification unknown. Cross-referencing. Cross-referencing." Another long pause. "Match found. Tag designation. Survivor Zero Environment Protocol. Security clearance required. This unit is not authorized to proceed." The droid's lights dimmed. Its sensor array retracted. Without another word, it floated away from Jinho's bed and returned to its charging station in the corner of the room. The other 2 droids followed it. All 3 machines powered down and went silent. Hayes stood frozen in the middle of the medical bay. His mind was racing with questions. What was the Survivor Zero Environment Protocol? Who had authorized it? How many other humans had been modified like Jinho? And why had the diagnostic droid refused to reveal more information? He turned to look at his patient. Jinho was sitting up in bed, watching Hayes with calm, dark eyes. There was no surprise on his face, no confusion, only a deep tiredness and something that looked like resignation. "You weren't supposed to find that," Jinho said quietly. Hayes walked slowly back to the bed. His legs felt weak. His hands were shaking slightly. "What are you?" he asked. "I'm human," Jinho said. "I'm still human. I'm just more than I used to be. Those implants, that technology, I've never seen anything like it. Our best medical science couldn't create something like this." Jinho smiled, but there was no happiness in it. You'd be surprised what humans can create when they're afraid enough. When they've watched enough people die. Hayes pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down heavily. "Tell me everything." "I can't." Jinho shook his head. "Not without authorization. What's inside me is classified at the highest level of the Terran Confederacy. If I tell you without permission, they'll consider me a traitor. You almost died. You survived something impossible. I think you've earned the right to some answers. It's not about what I've earned. It's about keeping people safe." Jinho looked toward the door of the medical bay, where Hayes knew the alien crew members were probably listening. "Some secrets exist for good reasons, Doctor. Some things are hidden not because they're shameful, but because the galaxy isn't ready to know about them." Hayes leaned back in his chair. His mind was still trying to process everything he had learned. A secret program. Human modification. Technology that could let people survive the most hostile environments in the universe. The implications were staggering. "Will you at least tell me one thing?" Hayes asked. Jinho waited. "Are there more like you?" The survivor was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft and heavy with the weight of a secret he had carried for years. "Yes, there are more. And we're everywhere. On ships like this one. On distant colonies. On space stations at the edge of known space. Wherever humans go, some of us go with them." He paused. "We're the ones who stay when everything goes wrong. We're the ones who survive when no one else can. We're the last line between disaster and total loss." Hayes felt a chill run down his spine. He had served with humans his entire career. He had trusted them with his life countless times. And now he was learning that some of them had been hiding capabilities beyond anything he could imagine. "I need to contact someone," Hayes said. "Someone who can authorize you to tell me more." Jinho nodded slowly. "Contact the Terran Confederacy Embassy on New Sol Station. Ask for Ambassador Yuna Kim. Tell her what your droids found. Tell her the tag they identified." He paused. "She'll come. And then you'll learn everything." Hayes stood up and walked toward the communication station. His hands were still shaking, but now it was not from fear. It was from the realization that the universe was much stranger and much more complicated than he had ever imagined. Behind him, Jinho lay back down on the bed and closed his eyes. He had carried this secret for 8 years. Now, for the first time, someone else would share the burden. He was not sure if that was a good thing or a very dangerous one. Ambassador Yuna Kim arrived on the Gentle Dawn 6 hours after Hayes sent his message. Her transport ship cut through space at maximum speed, using diplomatic clearance codes that allowed it to bypass every checkpoint and patrol between New Sol Station and the debris field where the Morning Star had died. She was a small woman, much smaller than Hayes had expected. Her hair was steel gray and cut short. Her face was lined with age, but her eyes were sharp and clear. Those eyes had seen classified documents that could shake governments. They had watched decisions being made that changed the course of human history. And now they looked at Hayes with a mixture of concern and calculation. "Where is he?" Kim asked as soon as she stepped off her shuttle. "Medical bay." "He's stable, recovering faster than should be possible." Kim nodded like this was exactly what she expected. "Take me to him, and clear everyone else out. What we're about to discuss cannot be heard by anyone without proper clearance." They walked through the corridors of the Gentle Dawn. The Valari and Morthax crew members watched them pass with curious eyes. But none of them tried to follow. They could sense that something important was happening. Something that was not meant for them. Jinho was sitting up in bed when they entered the medical bay. He looked stronger now. The color had fully returned to his face, and his movements were smooth and easy. When he saw Kim, he straightened his back and gave a small nod of respect. "Ambassador, Jinho." Kim walked to his bedside and looked down at him with an expression Hayes could not read. "You survived the impossible again. Not by choice." Jinho's voice was heavy. "I tried to save them. I tried to get to the emergency pods. But the explosion was too fast. Too complete. By the time I reached the first pod, everyone inside was already dead." Kim placed a hand on his shoulder. It was a gentle gesture, almost motherly. "You kept the beacon running. You made sure someone would come. That's what matters." She turned to Hayes and pointed to a chair. "Sit down, Doctor. I'm going to tell you something that fewer than 100 people in the entire Terran Confederacy know. Once you hear it, you cannot unhear it. Your life will be different from this moment forward. Do you understand?" Hayes sat down. His heart was beating fast, but he kept his voice steady. "I understand." Kim activated a small device on her wrist. The air in the room seemed to change, becoming thick and heavy. Hayes tasted something like copper on his tongue. He recognized the sensation. It was a privacy field, the most advanced kind. Nothing they said in this room would be heard or recorded by anyone outside. 40 years ago, Kim began, there was a human colony on a planet called Kepler 442. It was a beautiful world. Green forests, blue oceans, perfect for human life. 6,000 people lived there. Families, children, scientists and farmers and teachers. They were building something wonderful. She paused. Her eyes grew distant, like she was seeing something far away and long ago. Then the atmospheric processors failed. All of them at once. No one knows why. Maybe it was a design flaw. Maybe it was sabotage. It doesn't matter now. What matters is that within 3 hours, the air became unbreathable. The temperature dropped below freezing. 6,000 people died. Men, women, children, all of them. Not a single survivor. Hayes felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. He had heard of the Kepler incident. Everyone had. It was one of the worst disasters in human history. But he had never heard the full story. The rescue ships arrived 2 days later, Kim continued. They found bodies everywhere. In homes, in streets, in emergency shelters that had not been designed to handle a complete atmospheric collapse. The images were difficult. Many of the rescue workers needed psychological treatment afterward. She turned to look at Jinho, then back at Hayes. After Kepler, the Terran Confederacy made a decision. They looked at our species and our place in the galaxy, and they saw a terrible truth. Humans are fragile. We need air. We need warmth. We need protection from radiation and pressure and 100 other environmental dangers. Other species in the Alliance have their own weaknesses, but none are quite as vulnerable as we are. Kim began to pace slowly around the medical bay. Her footsteps were soft on the metal floor. The question became, what can we do about this? We cannot change human biology overnight. We cannot make everyone stronger or more resistant to environmental hazards. But we could do something smaller, something targeted. We could create a small group of people who could survive where others could not. People who could stay behind when disaster struck. People who could keep emergency systems running, activate distress beacons, guide rescue efforts, and bear witness to tragedies so that they would not be forgotten. Hayes looked at Jinho with new understanding. The Survivor Zero Environment Protocol. Yes, Kim nodded. It took 15 years to develop the technology. Neural interfaces that regulate body temperature. Nanites in the bloodstream that recycle oxygen and repair cellular damage. Polymer mesh around the spine that protects the nervous system from shock and trauma. We tested everything carefully. We made sure it was safe. And then we asked for volunteers. Volunteers? Hayes was surprised. People chose this? Jinho spoke up, his voice quiet but firm. We all chose it. Every single one of us. No one was forced. No one was tricked. We knew exactly what we were agreeing to. Kim sat down in a chair across from Hayes. The volunteers were not random. They were all people who had experienced loss. People who had watched friends or family die in disasters they could not prevent. People who carried that weight with them every day and who wanted to make sure no one else would have to feel the same helplessness. How many? Hayes asked. How many people have this protocol? 2,000. Spread across the Confederacy. On colony ships. Research stations. Mining outposts. Exploration vessels. Anywhere humans go into danger, at least one of us goes with them. Jinho pulled down the collar of his medical gown, revealing a tattoo over his heart. It was a small ship surrounded by stars, with thousands of tiny marks spiraling outward. These are the 6,000 from Kepler. I carry them with me. I remember them so that their deaths were not meaningless. Hayes stared at the tattoo. 6,000 marks. 6,000 lives lost. And this man had chosen to carry that memory forever, written into his skin and his bones. What happened to the Morning Star, Kim said, was not an accident. Jinho told you they were attacked. We believe it was a test. Someone wanted to see how humans would respond to a surprise assault on a civilian vessel. They didn't know about the protocol. They didn't know that one person would survive. So Jinho is evidence, Hayes said slowly. Evidence that there was an attack. More than that. Jinho is a witness. He saw the enemy ship. He can describe it. Our analysts are already working on identifying who was responsible. Kim stood up and straightened her uniform. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because you discovered the protocol, and now we need to decide what to do about it. Hayes felt a flash of fear. Are you going to silence me? Kim actually smiled at that. No, Doctor. We're not the villains in this story. We don't kill people to keep secrets. What we're going to do is give you a choice. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small data chip. On this chip is everything. The full history of the protocol. The technology involved. The list of every volunteer and their current assignments. If you accept it, you'll become part of our network. You'll know everything, and you'll be expected to keep it secret. You'll also be expected to help us when needed. To treat protocol volunteers when they're injured. To keep our existence hidden from those who would use it against us. Hayes took the chip. It was lighter than he expected. Such a small thing to hold such enormous secrets. And if I refuse, then you forget everything you've learned today. We have technology that can erase specific memories without damaging anything else. You'll wake up tomorrow believing that Jinho simply had incredible luck. You'll never know the truth. Hayes looked at the chip in his hand. Then he looked at Jinho, the impossible survivor who had chosen to become something more than human so that others might live. The choice was not difficult. I'll keep your secret, Hayes said. I'll help however I can. Kim nodded, and something like respect appeared in her sharp eyes. Welcome to the protocol, Dr. Hayes. I hope you never regret this decision. Outside the medical bay, the alien crew members waited with questions they would never be able to ask. But Hayes knew that soon, some of them would learn the truth as well. The protocol could not remain secret forever. And when the galaxy finally discovered what humanity had done, everything would change. He just hoped the change would be for the better. The truth could not stay hidden for long. The Valari and Morthax crew members had seen too much. They had watched the diagnostic droid shut down. They had watched Ambassador Kim arrive with urgent speed. They had felt the privacy field activate and knew that important secrets were being shared behind closed doors. 3 days after Kim's arrival, the Valari commander Swift Song at dawn requested a formal meeting. He was not angry, but his feathers kept shifting between colors of confusion and concern. The Morthax delegate, a crystalline being called Prism of Seven Angles, joined through a holographic link from their home world. Their geometric body flickered with patterns that Hayes had learned to recognize as deep interest. They gathered in the ship's conference room. Kim sat at one end of the long table. Jinho sat beside her, wearing a fresh uniform and looking stronger than he had any right to look after what he had survived. Hayes took a seat nearby, his new knowledge weighing heavy on his mind. Swift Song stood at the opposite end of the table. His feathers were pale blue now, showing formal respect but also uncertainty. When he spoke, his voice was musical and careful. "We have been allies with humanity for 80 years, he began. "We have shared technology. We have fought enemies together. We have trusted each other with our lives and our futures. But trust requires honesty. And I believe something important has been hidden from us." Kim nodded slowly. She had expected this moment. She had prepared for it. "You are correct, Commander. The Terran Confederacy has kept a secret from the Alliance. Not out of mistrust, but out of necessity. We were not sure how you would react to the truth." Prism of Seven Angles made a soft chiming sound. "We have seen your survivor. We have watched your medical droids refuse to complete their scans. We have felt the weight of hidden knowledge in every conversation since his rescue. Whatever this secret is, it has already created distance between us. Perhaps sharing it will bring us closer together." Kim looked at Jinho. He gave her a small nod. "It was time. 40 years ago," Kim began, "humanity experienced a disaster that killed 6,000 people. After that disaster, we developed a program called the Survivor Zero Environment Protocol. It is a modification program. Volunteers receive implants and nanotechnology that allow them to survive extreme environmental conditions. Conditions that would kill any normal human. Conditions that would kill members of any known species in the Alliance." The room went silent. Swift Song's feathers turned pale gray. Prism's crystalline body dimmed until it was almost dark. Hayes watched their reactions carefully. He could see fear, confusion, and something else. Something that looked like the beginning of understanding. "You have engineered yourselves," Swift Song said slowly. "You have made humans who cannot be killed by cold or vacuum or radiation." "A small number of us," Kim corrected. 2,000 people out of billions. And only for survival and rescue purposes. Not for warfare. Not for conquest. These volunteers exist to save lives, not to take them." Prism's form brightened slightly. "The distinction seems academic. What prevents your Confederacy from creating soldiers who cannot be killed by environmental hazards? Warriors who could board any vessel, survive any defensive measure, fighting conditions where others would die instantly." The question hung in the air like a blade. It was the question Kim had feared since the protocol began. It was the question that kept military leaders awake at night, dreaming of soldiers who could not be stopped by anything the universe could throw. At them, Jin-Ho stood up. The movement was slow and deliberate. He walked around the table until he stood in the center of the room, where everyone could see him clearly. The alien delegates shifted backward slightly, an instinctive reaction to a being they suddenly saw as something dangerous and unknown. "You want to know what prevents it?" Jinho said. His voice was calm but heavy with emotion. "We do. The 2,000 of us. The volunteers. We are what prevents it. He reached up and pulled down the collar of his uniform, revealing the tattoo over his heart. The small ship. The 6,000 marks. A memorial written in ink and skin. Everyone who joins the protocol has a story like mine. We all watch people die. Friends, family, crewmates. We felt the helplessness of not being able to save them. We carry that weight every single day. He paused and looked directly at Swift-Song. I didn't volunteer for this because I wanted to become a weapon. I volunteered because I held my sister's hand while she died on Kepler 442, and I promised her I would never let anyone feel that alone again. The room was completely silent. Even the hum of the ship's engines seemed to fade away. My friend Danny Park lost his wife and daughter on a ship called the Horizon. 800 people died that day because a navigation error sent them into an asteroid field. Danny survived because he was on a shuttle running supplies to a nearby station. He came back to find nothing but debris and bodies. He joined the protocol 3 months later. Jin-Ho turned to face Prism of 7 Angles. Officer Lisa Moon was on Titan when a mining facility collapsed. 300 workers were trapped underground. Lisa spent 4 days digging through rubble with her bare hands, trying to reach them. She only saved 7. She joined the protocol so that next time she might save more. He walked back to the table and placed both hands on its surface. We are not weapons. We are not soldiers. We are people who refuse to accept that death always wins. We modified ourselves not to fight, but to survive. To stay when everyone else has to leave. To keep the lights on and the beacons running when the universe tries to kill everything around us. Swift-Song's feathers had changed color again. They were no longer gray with fear. Now they were deep purple, a color Hayes had never seen on a Valari before. He did not know what it meant, but it looked like something close to reverence. Among my people, Swift-Song said softly, we have a term. Those who fly into storms so others may shelter. We honor them above all others. They are the bravest and most selfless of our kind. I did not think to find such beings among humans. You'll find them everywhere you look, Jin-Ho replied. We just usually don't survive long enough for anyone to notice. Prism of 7 Angles moved closer to the holographic projector, their crystalline form now glowing with warm golden light. I must apologize. When I asked about weapons and soldiers, I was thinking as a strategist. I was seeing the technology and imagining its military applications. I did not consider the hearts of those who carry it. Kim spoke up. That's understandable. When we first developed the protocol, our own military leaders had the same thoughts. Some of them pushed hard to expand the program, to create entire armies of environmental survivors. But the volunteers themselves refused. They made it clear that if the protocol was ever used for war, they would shut it down. They would remove their implants and walk away. And the Confederacy accepted this? Swift-Song sounded surprised. They had no choice. The protocol only works with willing volunteers. The technology requires a specific mental state to function properly. Soldiers who are forced into the program don't survive the modification process. It only works for people who genuinely want to save others. Hayes watched the alien delegates process this information. He could see their fear fading, replaced by something new. Not quite trust. Not yet. But the beginning of understanding. The recognition that humanity had done something remarkable. Not because they wanted power, but because they refused to accept that some deaths were inevitable. What happens now? Swift-Song asked. Now that we know your secret? Kim stood up and walked to the center of the room, standing beside Jin-Ho. That depends on you. We have kept this secret for 40 years because we were afraid of how the Alliance would react. We feared you would see us as threats, as beings who had made themselves too dangerous to trust. She looked at Swift-Song, then at Prism. But perhaps we were wrong. Perhaps the Alliance is ready to know the truth. And perhaps, if you are willing, we could share this technology with you. Help you create your own protocol volunteers, so that when disaster strikes your ships and your colonies, there will always be someone left to survive. Someone left to save who can be saved. Someone left to remember those who could not be saved. The offer hung in the air. Hayes watched the alien delegates exchange looks through the holographic link. He saw their confusion turning to consideration, their fear turning to hope. You would give us this technology? Prism asked. After keeping it secret for so long? We would share it, Kim said. Because that's what allies do. And because the universe is too dangerous for any of us to face alone. Swiftsong's feathers settled into a deep, warm gold. It was the color of acceptance, of gratitude, of the beginning of something new. Then let us begin, he said. Let us learn what it truly means to survive. 3 weeks passed. The Gentle Dawn completed its mission in the debris field and returned to New Sol Station, the largest human settlement in this sector of space. The station hung in orbit around a blue and green world that reminded Jinho of Earth. He had never been to Earth. He had been born on a colony ship and raised on distant worlds. But he had seen pictures. He had heard stories. He knew what home was supposed to look like, even if he had never seen it with his own eyes. The memorial service for the Morning Star was held in the station's Great Hall. It was a vast space with high ceilings and walls covered with holographic displays showing images of stars and distant galaxies. Hundreds of people filled the seats. Families of the crew members who had died. Friends and colleagues who had known them. Representatives from the Terran Confederacy and the allied species who wanted to pay their respects. Jinho stood at the front of the hall in his dress uniform. He was the only survivor, which meant he had been asked to speak. He had prepared words. He had practiced them in his quarters the night before. But standing here now, looking out at all the faces filled with grief and loss, those words felt empty and useless. The holographic displays shifted, showing images of the Morning Star before the attack. A beautiful ship. A home for 847 people who had dreams and hopes and futures that would never come true. Jinho recognized faces in the crowd. Wives who had lost husbands. Children who had lost parents. An elderly woman in the front row who wept silently as she stared at a photograph of a young man who looked just like her. Jinho took a deep breath and began to speak. I was not supposed to survive. None of us were supposed to survive what happened that day. The attack came without warning. The explosion was too fast, too complete. In less than 3 minutes, everyone I knew on that ship was gone. His voice echoed through the great hall. Every eye was on him. Every ear listened to his words. I wanted to save them. I tried to save them. I ran through corridors filled with fire and smoke, looking for anyone who was still alive. I found a little girl hiding in a storage closet. Her name was Minji. She was 7 years old. She asked me if her mother was coming to get her. I told her yes. I told her everything would be okay. And then the hull breach ripped her out of my arms and into the darkness of space. Tears ran down Jinho's face. He did not wipe them away. He let them fall. I could not save Minji. I could not save her mother. I could not save the captain or the engineers or the doctors or any of the 846 people who died on the Morning Star. All I could do was survive. All I could do was keep the beacon running so that someone would come. So that you would know what happened to your loved ones. So that their deaths would not be forgotten. He paused and looked at the elderly woman in the front row. She met his eyes, and he saw something in her face that looked like gratitude mixed with unbearable pain. I carry them with me now. Every name, every face, every life that was lost. They are part of me, and they will be part of me until the day I die. That is the promise I make to all of you. Your families will not be forgotten. Your friends will not be forgotten. The morning star will live on in the memory of those who survived. Jinho stepped back from the podium. The great hall was silent except for the soft sounds of weeping. Then, slowly, people began to stand. One by one, row by row, until everyone in the hall was on their feet. Not applauding, not cheering, just standing in silent respect for the man who had survived the impossible and carried their loved ones' memories back to them. After the ceremony, Hayes found Jinho standing alone at an observation window. The survivor was staring out at the stars, his reflection ghostly in the transparent metal. He looked tired. Not physically. Something deeper than that. That was a beautiful speech, Hayes said. Jinho shook his head. It wasn't enough. Nothing I could say would be enough. Those people lost everything. I'm just a reminder of what they lost. Hayes stood beside him and looked out at the same stars. The Valari High Council issued a statement today. They're calling the protocol a testament to human resilience and compassion. They want to work with us to develop similar technology for their own people. Jinho nodded but said nothing. The Morthacs are also interested. Not for weapons. They were very clear about that. They want to use it for rescue operations in their border territories. They've lost a lot of people to environmental failures over the years. They think the protocol could help save lives. Jinho finally turned to look at Hayes. That's good. That's what it was supposed to be for. Not for fighting. Not for winning wars. Just for surviving. Just for giving people a chance when everything else is gone. Hayes studied the survivor's face. He saw the weight of everything Jinho had been through. The loss, the pain, the impossible burden of being the only one left alive. But he also saw something else. A quiet strength. A refusal to give up. Kim told me you've requested reassignment. Deep space exploration. The New Frontier Expedition. Jinho turned back to the window. Someone has to go first. We're sending ships into space no human has ever seen. If something goes wrong out there, if we run into dangers we can't predict, or enemies we can't fight, someone needs to survive long enough to warn the others. To tell them what happened. To make sure the next ship is ready. It's dangerous. More dangerous than anything you've faced before. I know. Jinho smiled slightly. But that's the point, isn't it? We don't become protocol volunteers because we want safe assignments. We become protocol volunteers because we want to be there when everything goes wrong. We want to be the last line of defense. The ones who stay behind. The ones who remember. Hayes thought about that for a long moment. He thought about his own life. The years he had spent as a doctor, trying to save lives one patient at a time. It was good work. Important work. But it was nothing compared to what Jinho and the other protocol volunteers did. They had given up normal lives. Normal bodies. Normal futures. All so that they could be there when no one else could. You know, Hayes said, when the droids flagged your implants, I expected something terrifying. A weapon. A threat. I thought I was going to discover that humans had been secretly building super soldiers to conquer the galaxy. And what did you find? Hayes smiled. A man who refused to let his crewmates die forgotten in the dark. A man who kept a beacon running for 3 days in conditions that should have killed him instantly. A man who carried 847 names back to their families so they could grieve and heal and move forward. He paused. That's the most human thing I've ever seen. Jinho was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft and filled with something that might have been hope. Then maybe the galaxy will learn what that really means. Maybe they'll understand that humanity's greatest strength was never our technology or our weapons or our ability to destroy, It was always something simpler, something that can't be engineered or modified or implanted. What's that? Hayes asked Dot. Jin-Ho turned away from the window and began walking toward the departure bay, where a shuttle was waiting to take him to his next assignment. He paused at the doorway and looked back at Hayes with eyes that had seen too much death, but still held on to life. Our refusal to let each other die alone. He walked through the door and disappeared into the corridor beyond. Hayes watched him go, thinking about everything he had learned in the past 3 weeks. The protocol, the volunteers, the impossible survivors who scattered themselves across the galaxy so that no human would ever be truly alone in the dark. Outside the window, the stars burned cold and bright. Somewhere out there, the new frontier expedition was waiting. Somewhere out there, new dangers and new wonders were waiting to be discovered. And Park Jin-Ho was walking toward all of it, ready to survive whatever the universe threw at him, ready to remember those who could not. Hayes turned away from the window and walked back to the medical bay. He had work to do, patients to treat, lives to save in his own small way. But he would never forget what he had learned. He would never forget the protocol or the volunteers who carried it. And whenever he looked up at the stars, he would think of Jin-Ho and all the others like him, the ones who survived so that others could live, the ones who remembered so that no one was ever truly forgotten. The ones who proved that being human was not about being strong or powerful or unbreakable. It was about refusing to give up, even when everything else was lost, even when death seemed certain, even when the universe itself seemed determined to destroy you. That was what it meant to be human. And that was something worth remembering.